Greetings, Poe fans. Welcome to another edition of Poe Unplugged. I am Carmen Bolden.
And I am Jeanie Smith, and we are
The Potastic Two.
Come zoom with us into the Unbook Club dedicated to the works of Mr. Edgar Allan Poe.
Good evening, and welcome back to Poe Unplugged. And tonight we are going to discuss Poe's poem, The City in the Sea. And is there anybody that wants to start the conversation tonight? I will if nobody else wants to. So one of the things that
Well, Holly was raising her hand. Were you
Oh,
waving
no, I
at
was saying-
everybody? Or
I mean, I can always talk. You guys know that. So go ahead,
Holly.
So
Yeah, no, go
you know how
for
I
it.
am.
Yeah, I wasn't
I
sure if
was-
you raised your hand or like, okay.
I was kind of like, so I always have issues with poetry, so don't make fun of me, guys. So like,
Oh,
when I
no.
read poetry, it's kind of like how I'm interpreting it. This could be totally crazy and not off. So like, I kind of view this as a really good example for me is like how Edgar Allan Poe is so good at taking something real and kind of blending this fantasy into it. So when I'm reading this, I'm kind of imagining like a sea, like a boat that like sunk under the water, and he's kind of constructing this like, death grabbed a throne, and then he's talking about all these like turrets and everything, all these vines growing. So basically, like this to me, I'm imagining this ship is kind of overcome with like algae and reefs and coral. And he talks about how like the what makes me think it's a ship is because he talks about how like the dead are there, they're bedazzled, they're bejeweled, kind of creating this almost like this fantasy, like this world underneath. But it's not like a pretty like Ariel the Little Mermaid where there's like like beautiful mermaids. It's like there's death under this water.
Yeah.
And I guess the only one thing I want to add to that about that mixture of real and fantasy is that when he talks about the water at the very end being red, there's actually, it's called like an algae bloom where the water can literally turn red in some parts of the world. So that's actually a scientific thing.
Oh, cool.
So I think it's kind of cool because here he's kind of like doing two things. He's using real things to kind of create this picture of like death and blood in the water. So for me, I just think it's a really beautiful story. And I kind of just like, I really love that mixture of like things seem more real when you add that.
Yeah.
Kind of like both of them together.
Yeah.
Drawing from reality, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Holly. I mean, Poe is the master at taking the imaginary and making it seem like it's something that's real that he witnessed and saw. And I know the first time I ever read this poem, it kind of made me think of Atlantis in a very like it was, like imploding or something. But I knew that Poe had edited this poem. The thing that I found out today when I was doing my research, he edited this poem at least twice, or there's three versions of it. And so, like on the Poe Museum's website, it's the newest version, which was published in 1845. But when he originally published it, it was in 1831, and he titled it The Doomed City. And then in 1836, he republished it and called it The City of Sin. And so I think it's really interesting that there are three versions of this. The 1831 and the 1836 version are very similar, but then the 1845 version, he takes out a whole stanza. Kind of, it's like around the second stanza, he takes that out. One of the other things that I thought was really interesting too was that there's a line in there, and I can look it up. But in the two early versions, he says the mask, the veil, and the vine. And he changed it to the last one as the veil, the violet, and the vine. And so, yeah, the veil, like a viola. Yeah. So like representing music, flora, or, sometimes flowers, the violet, it could represent a female. And then the vine, like grapevines or some kind of, vines that are decaying, like crawling all over this, decrepit city. And so I was like, did he do that for alliteration? What was the whole meaning of taking out the mask and putting in the violet? That's a huge change, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, he
in
does do that
mine,
too when he's explaining. Oh, I'm sorry, Jeannie.
no,
I'm
go
on like a
ahead.
lag or something. No, I was just saying about the vine and the flower thing because he does go in there talk about how there was like carved flowers and like I
Yeah.
think it was like a fireplace facade. So he's definitely trying to give this sense of like let life somehow under the water, be under the sun. And
Yeah.
sorry, Jeannie.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say that this poem is very much descriptive of his love of history, in my opinion, because he is bringing in like the one of the seven wonders of the world, the hanging vines of Babylon.
Yeah.
You know, with the that type of history. So that's kind of like where the vines and stuff that I think he was going. Then also, every time I was reading it, I would get some little, some little adaptation from the story of Atlantis, but more on the apps of the Library of Alexandria and
Okay.
that type of thing where, it fell into the sea and then a lot of history was lost. But then also he talks about the standing towers and it being seen. But at the same time, towards the end, I got to where it was like the sea was rising, the city was coming up, and it was being raised by the evil. Like the
Mm-hmm.
water was like the soul of the evil. So then I got the river Styx. So then I
Oh
got
yeah.
that type. So, every time I read it, it's always, I go back to where he loves to allude to types of history, whether it's the
Mm-hmm.
mythology, whether it's actual things that, we have in the history books that have happened. But the city itself, it's so much a definitive of where people are drowning in the bad.
Yeah.
It's like it houses the souls of those who cannot, like they're stuck in purgatory, basically like one of the
Yeah.
rings of Dante's,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like you can't really. But that's the thing. Carmen and I were discussing before about his different versions that he changed
Mm-hmm.
some things, but at the same time, like I was telling her, it seems like it's still missing something. To me, it's like it's still incomplete. And I mean, I know some of Poe's works, he deliberately starts like in the middle. He
Mm-hmm.
leaves an opening for a beginning and an opening for an end, so you can interpret your own. But for some reason, with this story, it's still missing something, and I don't think he quite got it. Even with his changes, I don't think he's still accomplished it, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
to me, that's the way I feel when I read it. So
You kind of wonder, since he did edit it and republish it, twice after the original, was he what, like Jeannie, like you said, was he done with it? Was he, planning on even going back to it, especially taking out a whole stanza? I mean, it's interesting to think about, if he really was not happy with it. I mean, I love the rhyming in it. It's beautiful. That's probably my favorite part of this poem.
yeah, he does great work with his wording and everything. And that's why I think part of me is like, dude, why do I feel like I'm still missing something?
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree, Jeannie, because like the first time I read it, I definitely thought like the lost city, with everything, because he was literally
Mm-hmm.
describing a city. Then I'm like, oh, is this his Poe? I'm like, is he really trying to, it's like that's kind of almost like the obvious. Is he really trying to do that? Is it
Mm-hmm.
metaphor for like life, like like literally like going under? But I don't know if you guys know. I don't want to get too off track, but obviously the Raven's his most successful poem. Did he
Mm-hmm.
edit that one a lot? Like, or does anybody know? Was that kind of like, hey, this one's done, or was it kind of did it go through lots of revisions?
I don't know for sure if he made multiple revisions. I'm sure he edited it some, but yeah,
Yeah.
that I'm not 100% sure of how many times he edited it.
Yeah, because like yeah, maybe you're right. Like maybe he wasn't happy, with it at
Mhm.
the end. I
Yeah.
I I must have read the very last version of the one I did today.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
but
I
yeah,
read
that's
all
definitely food
three.
for
Yeah.
thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Dr. Jeff,
definitely understand. Sorry, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, I think Dr. Jeff, you were gonna say something.
Oh yes. It it kind of reminds me of the Night on Bald Mountain sequence from Fantasia. I see some of
Hmm.
those images
Okay.
when I'm reading, and it also reminded me of different incarnations of death, like the Earl King by
Hmm.
Johann
Yep.
Wolfgang von Goethe, because my students and I have read that recently.
Okay.
Um,
I can
and
see that.
um, I don't know how much he refined and edited The Raven, but to me that poem, at least in its finished form, is so unified. It's as if it just all burst out of him. It's like a fever
Hmm.
dream
Mhm.
Yeah,
that
Yeah.
has a
true.
beginning and he took it to the end. Whereas this is more impressionistic,
Yeah.
and leaves more left unsaid and more for us to think about. It's not as demonstrative and totally mapped out as The Raven.
Yeah, I agree. You could definitely categorize this. This is a very surreal poem when you
Hmm.
think about just what you can get out of it, and even like Jeannie, you mentioned Dante, especially like with the red, underneath, in the water. That's the lights coming out was the red. And Holly, I'm glad you added the science part of the algae. That was really fascinating to me, to think about that. But you also, can you think of this biblically? I mean, yes, he did mention Babylon, and I didn't
That's
even
true.
think of the Hanging Gardens, Jeannie. But
Mhm.
could this be like a Sodom and Gomorrah? The city that's, it's just falling apart. There's, all there is death there now.
And one of his titles was City of Sin.
Yes.
Yep.
Hmm.
And I think that might be one of the reasons that he kept revising it, and that it may just seem like it's incomplete for me, because one of the things, like when Holly, you were bringing up like a sinking ship, we could go so far as to equate it with Davy Jones's locker. Like the place where the sailors go to die at sea, or the mermaids with the sirens, when we go think about Iliad, and Jason and the Golden Fleece, and all those, about how it's, once more, he's leading us on this journey, and that it's still changing. It's underwater, it's not in water, it's coming out of water, it's ebbing and flowing. And I know that's sorry, kind of got in the moment, but it is that thing. And that's what I feel like the river Styx is the one thing that truly hits upon me. And like with Holly, you're bringing up the red algae, but also if we think about it and we look at it, there is actually an underwater waterfall in the ocean. I mean, it's bigger than the Venezuela Angel Falls, and it's an underwater waterfall. And
Hmm.
so it's so much that even though it might be covered in water, there's still life under there. And I think that's what
Yeah.
he was going for. I can see it, and
Hmm.
but it's not a life that's pleasant. It's not pretty. It's hardship, and that's one of the things I think, um, especially in those ages, because he was closer to the Greek, um, and the mythology and all that kind of stuff than we are now.
Hmm.
So it was more of an influence for him.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. And so, yeah, with the different designs for the name, the different editing, I honestly don't think he was finished with it. I think it was one of those things that he kept changing it because it kept changing. You know,
Yeah.
Unlike the Raven, where the Raven was the complete, journey. This one had not reached an end for him. It was still changing. So that's what I get from it.
Yeah, and even like when you think about the titles, the doomed city to the city of sin to the city in the sea. The first two are very negative. The city in the sea, I remember the first time I ever sat down to read this, and Will had said, "Great imagery," and I'll always read a seaside poem. I agree. I love things about the sea and the ocean, and can anytime read those kinds of things. And I remember sitting down to read this the first time. It's been a long time ago. And I was like, oh, I'm excited about this. And I was like, this is not what I pictured. But thinking about Poe, I'm like, it wasn't like shocking that it was about doom, gloom, and death. But, and agree, the imagery was beautiful, even though it was so, gloomy, I guess is the best word. But it's just I agree. I don't think he was finished with this. It seemed like it needed. I don't. I like it. It's not one of my favorites of his, but the rhyme part of it really draws me in. But one of the things I was going to bring up that I'm not sure if anybody knows. So I was looking up information about this poem, and I ran across someone talking about a movie about this poem. And apparently, so, the Corman Poe cycle ended. The last movie was 1964. And so American International Pictures decided, we want to keep this Poe thing going, especially with Vincent Price. And so in 1965, they put out a movie called War Gods of the Deep. Has anybody seen it? I'll say Jenna.
I have.
I think I
Okay,
have.
and
Yeah.
Keith, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like blown away when I was looking at this today. So I actually like watched it this afternoon before joining in for tonight. And Vincent Price reads part of the poem at the beginning, and then what's really kind of cool is that the two main characters are trying to find the lady that Vincent Price's group had kind of abducted, and they were going in this little room. And I mean, there's a lot going on before this, but they find a book of the works of Edgar Allan Poe. And so they open it up, and it's the city and the sea. And then there's this downward camera angle where they're looking at it, and the words are on the paper. And so then they're not reading it aloud. It's Vincent Price's voice reading part more of the poem. And I was just like, it's not the greatest movie ever. I enjoyed it, but the way they designed the sea in the movie, or the city, I should say, some of the elements of that really, they did, I think, try to take some of that what was in the poem and made it real, and as real as they could in the movie. Any thoughts on that of the movie, that those of you who've seen it?
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time, but I
Yeah.
remember it. I like almost all of Vincent Price's movies and
Oh
all of
yeah.
the Poe movies.
Yeah, he was
I
fantastic.
rewatched The Haunted Palace the other day, although that's more Lovecraft than Poe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
check it out.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
War Gods of the Deep.
War
Mhm.
Gods of the Deep. Yes. Yeah, Leela and Keith, do y'all remember seeing it?
I remember it. I remember it. The first time I saw it, I thought, okay. And then I had to watch it a second time and to get it
Yeah.
because I wasn't expecting it. And then the pointing part when the camera angle on that, then it kind of all clicked with me. I'm like, oh, I got it now.
Yeah.
But
An alternate title for the movie is City in the Sea.
Yes.
Yeah.
It
Yes.
goes by that title as well as War Gods of the Deep.
Mm-hmm.
but they did that then for some reason. Europe had one title and we had another, just for
Mhm.
distribution reasons, and it's confusing. But
Yeah.
about this point, I honestly, reading it, I was filled with a sense of dread toward the end. Maybe some of you thought the city was rising from the sea. I thought it was sinking into the sea, and all I could think about was a scene from the Clash of the Titans where Zeus swoops down on that man's kingdom and crushes him and floods the entire city away because he put his daughter in the coffin and sent her off to sea. Perseus, his mother. That's what I thought of. I just thought of the destruction of a city, when
Yeah.
I read it the second time. But I mean, I kind of just felt dread with it. I'm like, oh, that's sad. That something
Mhm.
so majestic is decayed, and this is what's going to happen to it. It's just going to fade away into the sea someplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good like kind of reaction to have with it. And like the one thing that when Poe described how death was kind of, he didn't use the word looming, but looming over it, I got this image in my head of, death, like the Grim Reaper with the black cloak and everything, with no face, like, like lording over the tall turrets that were there and just, destroying the city. That was my first like image that came to mind.
And I was like you, Keith. I could never figure out because most of the time I was like, the city's rising, but then it was like, no, the city's sinking. And then it was like, no, the city's coming up because it's being raised up by all the vileness and the evil that's on land. But then the next thing I would get is like, no, it's being sunk because it's trying to get away because the good and the evil is pulling it. It's like a tug of war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like it gets the buoyancy of the city is based on the good versus bad, in
Yeah.
my opinion, and that's the way I got it because like the waves were pushing it down because it was under an onslaught of evil, and it needed to be drowned, it needed to be gone, kind of like the Sodom and Gomorrah story.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time is like, no, the bad was winning on land, so that the sea was being pulled away and the city was coming back up because it was going to take its rightful place in the middle where it could thrive with all the evil parts. But then the evil and the beauty was always at war, in my opinion, because that's the one thing with Poe. He always paints the picture with the good and the bad, and you're like, you see beauty in things that you would normally not see beauty, I guess is what I'm trying to get across.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes it that way. It's like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon would come to mind when he was referencing them, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. But then you think about Nebuchadnezzar, and he was the first to enslave the Jews,
Yeah.
and and that type of thing. And not a lot of people know that. The Hammurabi Code is what came out of it, which is the justice.
Mm-hmm.
The rules of engagement for people, which is kind of ironic. And thank God we don't live by some of them today. An eye for an eye and all that wonderful stuff, because they literally would go for that. It's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
no, I'll take your eye. Thank you. Goodbye. Oh, I'll take
Yeah.
your hand. Nah. So I mean that's the thing. That I guess that's the history person in me, that I was seeing it from that point of view. I was seeing all the nuances that he was putting in there, and it just made it more for me. And it was more than just the imagery; it was the reality mixed in with it. So, but yeah, I get what you're saying, Keith. I mean, he wrote it to the point to where it is very self reflection, whoever reads it, how you interpret it. And
Yeah.
that's why, I guess, is why I keep thinking it's not done. It's like he didn't finish it, because to me, it seems like it's incomplete.
Yeah.
I felt reading it. I had to read it a couple of times, before I can get it.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt at one point reading it that I was kind of like I had walked upon the city that was completely abandoned. It used to be grand and full of life and everything, and you could tell that it was grand at one time. But even though things were, but to me in my mind, all I pictured was decay. Decay. The more I read about it, and then it sinks right before me in my mind, of course, into the sea, and it's like, are you? And it's kind of like, you dread it happening, but you know it's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
You
it
can't stop it.
does. Hmm.
And it just took me um I can't remember what I referenced it to. It was something that I'd seen or read about just a desolate place, and it was just
Okay.
so sad that that it did. That's I mean, I wish I could say it was a happy little poem that cheered me up, and I was just happy to. But I said, it was kind of it made you think, but it didn't make you really
Yeah,
think about good stuff.
absolutely. Do you guys want to hear like where I'll read the part where Poe took out after the second version?
Sure.
Yes.
So the first stanza on, I know the website ends with, I believe, have gone to their eternal rest. Then it picks up with their shrines and palaces and towers. And I have to
Oops.
find the part. Hold on.
All right, cat. I'm not just scratching post.
It's actually, yeah. So the first part, the doomed city and also the city in the sea, it has have gone to their eternal rest. And then the melancholy waters lie. And then,
Okay, I got that.
Yeah.
okay. And then this is where, well, I'm making sure I meant to mark this earlier and I forgot. But then he puts in a heaven that doth not contemn, with stars is like a diadem. We liken Our Lady's eyes to them, but there that everlasting pall, it would be mockery to call such dreariness a heaven at all. I don't think,
Mm.
yeah, that's different. Yeah, and so I thought interesting that that part got cut out of the final.
It should have been cut. It doesn't. It feels cheap compared to the wording of his other stuff, in my opinion. So good
Yeah,
job, Mr. Poe.
Yeah, that
Not
yeah,
that he needs
that,
my approval, but good
that
job. Yeah,
sounds
yeah,
kind of stodgy compared to the
yeah,
right.
rest of
yeah,
the flowing poem.
yeah.
Yeah, but the final version is a whole lot shorter than the first two, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, it's like he kept writing and then, you know, it's like he realized it's too much. Some of it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And so he also changed, I thought this was really interesting. In the final version, the last part, hell rising from 1,000 thrones shall do it reverence, which rhymes with the hence part. And then in the original one, he says, all Hades from 1,000 thrones shall do it reverence. So he changes Hades to hell, and death to some more happy clime shall give his undivided time. So those are the last two lines that were added after shall do it reverence. And so in the final version. And so he took out, and death to some more happy clime, and it's CLIME, shall give his undivided time. I thought that was really interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I like the line that was cut, but I mean, like obviously he did that, I guess, for more dramatic.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just, again, this is one that made me like really think more than, especially reading all three versions of it and just looking at some things of people talking about it. One person that I found was saying that the Valley of Unrest is kind of almost like a paired poem with this one because it's all about the land. You have all this, the war and that has gone on, and the death and what's left of the people who lived and died there versus the sea and the sin and whatever the people did, because it also made me think, okay, if this is Sodom and Gomorrah, which I was thinking, but if it wasn't, what was the city of sin? Was it something he just invented, or was it an allusion to Sodom and Gomorrah or something else? It just kind of makes you wonder. I don't know. Other thoughts?
I just wanted to agree with Keith, like he was saying, like about how the sense of dread, and I think that's what Edgar Allan Poe does so great, right? He is describing something really negative, but he does it in like such a beautiful way. It kind of catches you off guard. It makes you think about it, like the way he can describe something so gross or bad, or I'm using really simple words like gross, bad. But anyway, the way he can describe it, like things like that, are really, it's just impressive use of words and language to kind of just paint something ugly beautiful. So yeah,
Yeah.
yay, Mr. Poe.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I was shocked when I found that there was a movie technical adaptation version of this poem. Um, obviously a lot of license was done within the movie, but there were some things that pulled out. Like there's one of the characters looks up on the wall when they're down going into this one room, and it's looks like kind of hieroglyphic language on this big like stone tablet on the wall. And he goes, that could be Babylonian. And I'm like, referencing the poem. And I thought that was really cool to do that. So, it's a movie that Vincent Price is amazing. Tab Hunter is another actor who's in it, who is very, he was one of the hunk guys of the, 60s. He's in it, but Vincent Price delivers an excellent performance as he always does. And that's worth watching to me, the movie.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Yeah, it sounds cool.
Yeah, it's free on Prime if you have it. So
I do. Yeah.
yeah. All right. Other thoughts? I had a feeling that we probably wouldn't have as much to say on, like, usually poems, we don't talk as much as we do on short stories. Any other thoughts?
Well, speaking of poems, I actually at our May poetry read in downtown Half Moon Bay, I decided to read a cover poem, and I performed El Dorado by Heart.
Oh, nice.
Great.
That went over very, very well.
Oh, that is cool. Very
Cool.
nice,
I
Will.
mentioned that.
Did anybody record, like video it?
No.
Okay. Oh, well, if you do that again, you need to have somebody record it and share it with us, because that would be great to see.
I will do that. I'll do
Yeah,
that.
that would be great.
Put him on the spot when we do that, as because we have we done that one yet, El Dorado? I don't think we
Yeah,
have.
we
Oh,
have.
have we? Oh.
Well, we had a guy, one of our guest speakers did like a performance of the poem.
Oh,
And
Mark DeWidziak did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because we were
Oh,
talking,
okay.
what I think that was the night. Weren't we talking about something else that night? And then he did that at the end, I think.
Mhm.
So
I think he
yeah,
was talking about his book, maybe.
I think you're right. Yeah,
And
I think so.
I remember he said that he always thought that El Dorado was about hope and not about despair, like many people think it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When you think about it like that, it is very different. Yeah.
Mark is working on a revised second edition of his The Night Stalker Companion.
Oh, nice. Okay.
That sounds good.
Oh, very cool. I'm reading his book on everything I learned in the Twilight Zone. I'm reading that
yes.
right now.
Mhm.
With
Good.
our trip coming up. We're leaving Friday to head up to upstate New York and going to see Rod Serling's grave and Binghamton, where he grew up, and going to a couple of the sites there that are loosely like thought about in like the episode of Walking Distance and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm excited about that. So I was like, I'm actually rewatching The Twilight Zone, and I've watched it a bazillion times, and reading Mark's book. And the book is great because it's kind of like a self-help book of what I learned in The Twilight Zone and applying it to like what you get out of it from like real life things that you can apply to your own life. It's really cool.
Well, speaking of Twilight Zone, my favorite episode, and it still is, and I taped a copy of it, is the Agnes Moorehead episode
Oh, yes.
where she doesn't say a thing.
The
Yeah.
It's just
Invaders,
The
yes.
yeah, the
Invaders.
Invaders. It's just pure acting. I mean, I fell in
Right.
love with it as
Yes.
a teenager, and I'm like, oh, I love this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Richard Matheson wrote that. And Trilogy of Terror with the Zuni doll is very similar,
Yes,
but it's
yes.
the same setup. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I remember
Jerry
that as a
Goldsmith does the
kid.
music for that episode, The Invaders. Yeah, that's a great one with a fantastic twist at
Ending.
the end.
Yeah,
Yes.
And Agnes Moorehead is wonderful.
yes, she
Yeah,
was.
she really is. Yeah, so I've been enjoying that, and one cool thing of like with reading this book and like thinking about Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont, the authors that wrote most of the other ones that Rod Serling didn't write. I think he wrote 72 out of the 160-ish, I think is what I read in Mark's book. But I know we're digressing, but Jeannie had to step away for a second, so she can't rein me in. But we'll be having opposite problems tonight. But thinking about it, because Richard Matheson did some of the scripts for the Corman movies and things like that, and it's just
Yeah.
like all this influence tied together is just so cool.
Mm-hmm. And this week, my students are watching Somewhere in Time.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
And they're going to write essays about the movie.
That's awesome.
that's a great movie.
It
Oh,
is.
it is.
And
My
I
husband-
usually
Yeah,
don't
go
go
ahead,
for
Keith.
stuff like that. I usually don't watch anything sappy because I'm like, I don't really want to deal with it. But that one, now that one gets to me. It did really. That one, I remember watching it. Actually, it was with my mother and sister, and they looked over at me, and then Amy's like, "Look, he's got a heart after all."
Oh, yeah. My husband and I got to go to Mackinac Island and the hotel where they did some of the filming.
Oh,
It
the Grand
is-
Hotel.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it is beautiful. It is so beautiful. And we got to ride this little I'm trying to think, it was kind of like it was a carriage up to the hotel. And so I played the theme song because it's Rachmaninoff, it's themed from Paganini and G.
Mhm.
And so I played that as we rode up, and my husband was just like, "Oh my gosh." It was
Yeah,
All right, I step away.
the Grand Hotel has the longest front porch in the world, as
It's
long as
beautiful.
Titanic.
Really?
Woo, woo.
It's huge.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's huge. If you ever get to go to Mackinac Island, it is amazing, and they have no cars. I mean, it's all horse, buggy, bicycle, walking. All that. It's just, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Mhm.
Absolutely beautiful.
That's why the filmmakers used the Mackinac Island for Somewhere in Time. Richard Matheson's novel Bid Time Return takes place at the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego, California,
Okay.
another hotel that's been around since before the turn of the 20th century. But when it came time to make the movie, everything there looked too modern. Modern buildings and light poles and neon signs had come up all around the hotel, and they couldn't make it look like 1912.
Okay.
But Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island could still look like 1912 because there are no cars, and so the hotel, becomes a character in the movie and gives it, the great atmosphere and presence.
Yeah.
And of course, John Barry's music is exquisite.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's so good. Jeannie, are you back?
Yes.
Okay. We digressed, and I said we're having opposite problems tonight. You had to step away, and you couldn't rein me in, so we kind of
Yeah.
got off topic.
You went Twilight Zone. That's what it was.
Yes.
I can
Uh-huh.
understand that.
Well,
And
I'm
someone-
Shame on you.
watching, reading. It's kind of hard not to bring it
No.
up.
Well, that's what's so wonderful about reading and literature and education, making connections among the different texts and writers and events in history and why these things were written the way they were.
Yeah.
And I can
agree.
actually see, this poem being one of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone episodes. Very much so. I mean, he would have taken this and he would have truly made it spectacular on screen,
Yeah.
just as
Yeah.
it is. He would have barely had to change anything because it fits truly with the out there concept.
Yeah.
I mean, and you were talking, Dr. Jeff, about how the building, especially the one on Mackinac Island, the hotel, how it's still stuck in that time,
Yes.
and it makes it a character on its own. And that's one of the things I think from this poem that Poe has done with the descriptions of the towers, of the, the way it's built, and he's made this city the character on its own.
Yeah.
Like it's a living, breathing underwater entity that you cannot escape.
Yeah.
And so that's, I mean, that's the thing. One of the things we do with our podcast, the 6 degrees of Poe, we always have the ties and the connections. And whether he
Absolutely.
meant to do it or not, he always alludes to something in his works. And then somebody always alludes to him somewhere down the road.
Yeah. And thinking about like this, the turrets and everything, this city as its own character, the way he described like the flora of the whole island, or I picture it as an island. You kind of wonder, okay, were these some things that kind of came back into mind when he wrote Fall of the House of Usher, with the house as a character? I mean,
Probably.
because there are some similarities in a way, some loose similarities, but I could see him going,
Yeah. And he does it so well. And yeah, Will, somebody should have recorded you doing El Dorado. I mean, come on.
And
Yes.
Just
you can
because I
always
might have
do
not
it
been
for
here,
us.
I can hear you.
Yeah, you can always do it for us one month
Yeah.
on the Zoom.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh, that
fine.
would be
Yeah.
great.
Recite it for us one month on Poe Unplugged. That'd be awesome.
That would be
I'm there.
great.
It's one of my favorite poems.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
yes.
probably my personal favorite.
It is fantastic. Fantastic.
And I've always felt that it is about hope. It's about dreams, and it's about what you're reaching for on your journey. That it's not about the end. It's about
Yeah.
what's to be and what's coming. So, yeah, when Mark recited it during, I think it was our January episode where him and Sempner, I think they were both on here at that time. Maybe was that February or January?
That was just Mark by himself, and then
Okay.
he and Chris came back
Yeah.
late at another time.
Yeah, so it was
And
Mark by himself when he was when he recited it, because we had him on as our special guest. It was after we did the interview with him.
yeah, because the more I think about it, I don't think we have actually done El Dorado. I'm gonna look and see real quick. Because that one we could put on the list, because I think there's a lot that we could say about El Dorado.
Yeah, as I said, I don't think we actually did that as a group, but I mean, I don't know. My memory, I don't know. I'm feeling kind of out there lately.
We haven't done it as a Poe Unplugged. I know, Carmen, we did it because I recited it on one of our specials that we had, like a New Year's special or something. But yeah, we haven't used it as a Poe Unplugged.
Yeah, the poems that we've done on Poe Unplugged, we've done Alone, Annabelle Lee. I'm going through the list. It's semi in alphabetical order. It's weird the way it puts the folders. We've done The Sleeper, otherwise known as Irene, The Bells, and we've done The Raven.
Cool. I'm down for El Dorado.
Yeah. So how about just, and we always remind at the end, July 30th, we're back to the last Tuesday of the month. We're starting back in July.
Okay, good. That's good.
Yeah, it's the normal
So I might
thing.
not be able to on the 23rd, but I should be able to on the 30th.
Oh, yay, Leila.
Yeah,
That's awesome. So we're doing a Descent into the Maelstrom. We were kind of going with water theme with, summertime. So how about for August, we do El Dorado? Let's just plan on that. And so that date will be August, because we have not planned out that far. And so it'll be August 27th.
All righty.
Okay.
So I'm gonna write that down.
Let me check my day planner.
Yeah, that'll be the last Tuesday of the month of August.
August the 27th.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. Let's see what's going on in my world.
And we'll be back in school for the fall.
Oh, already. Wow.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and I don't know if y'all saw the one comment that Will made earlier. He said that the War Gods of the Deep sounded like a Metallica album title. Yes, it does. Oh, I thought that was funny.
It reminds me of the Black Sabbath War Pigs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's one of my favorite songs.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Hello, Bird. How can I help you?
Yeah. So any more suggestions you guys have, just email us. And because we'd love to know if you've got favorites. I know some of the favorites we've already done for a lot of people, but if there's other favorites that are, not as known to, the public as others, we want to go through everything that Poe wrote. So, we're going to get there eventually with everything. So
I don't know if you've seen this or not, but I can't remember which channel I caught it on. Poe in Requiem. I think it was on Tube. Yeah, it was on Tubi.
I have not seen that.
Well, let me warn you. It's got a different take on some of the stories. It's like the Telltale Heart is from a woman's point of view, that does the crime, but it's kind of semi-slasher, a little in your face, adult. It should be rated X, not shown after midnight, where kids can't see it kind of movie.
Okay. Is it real people or is it a cartoon?
Okay, there's one with real people. So the one with the cartoon was the Requiem one, the cartoon one. That one's creepy.
Okay.
I think I started watching that, or I think I bought part of it. I never finished it, but I think I've seen the part of it. I think I have that, but I never watched it.
I saw them back to back, and I remember the cartoon one. So that was the first one I named. I can't remember what the title of the other version was, which was kind of gory. So, but I didn't feel like getting up and changing the TV channel.
Yeah, I understand that. Trust me.
Yes.
Absolutely. I've watched many things that I didn't want to because I just didn't feel like changing the channel.
Yeah.
Well, the batteries in the remote have been dead for a month. I can change them if I felt like it, if I would just remember to pick them up at the store. But when I get home, I'm like, oh, forget it. And I just flop down, turn it on. What's there is there. But most of the time it stays on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, for me, sometimes I'll start watching something. I've read the synopsis. It looks interesting. And then I get into it and I'm like, oh, this is really not good. But then it's got some kind of mystery behind it. And it's like, okay, I don't like this, but I have to see where it goes. And so I end up
I'm the same way. I have to see it to the end. If I start with a movie, I have to.
And then Will said, I watched a horror film last night with super bad acting, but was also too lazy to change the channel. Yep. I know. I know the feeling. Oh.
Well, and I hate getting down the rabbit hole sometimes when you're on Prime or some of the other streaming like Tubi or Roku and everything. And all of a sudden you're just going through this and you'll stop and you'll read it and you're like, nah, and then you keep going. And then you've killed like almost half an hour just trying to find something worthy to watch.
I know.
And guess what? I always end up on Perry Mason because I'm like, I've seen them every season. I've seen every episode of every season so many times. And it's like, it's either Perry Mason, Adam 12, Emergency. It's like, well, if you can't find anything good to watch, you might as well stick with the class.
Well, exactly.
Prime and Tubi caters if they have a lot of information about you. Amazon's got plenty for me because I shop there so much for gifts and everything. So I noticed with all this AI mess going on, I noticed back a couple of months ago that everything that it was pulling up besides the main things that we all get, but anything that would tickle my fancy was there. You know what I'm saying? Like a horror movie, and I'm like, this is creepy. Yeah. I don't like this.
It's like it has tag what you like, and all of a suddenly everything is popping up, and you're like, wait
Yeah.
a minute, I didn't do that.
Right.
But yeah, it's
Knows you
those
better than
bots.
you know yourself.
But I,
Yeah.
I have unplugged Alexa because of that when I'm talking around her, because I'm getting a feeling that she's getting a little bit too much information from me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Oh,
mine stopped working because I cuss at them too much sometimes. So
You can, Jeannie,
she
you can break it that way.
does.
My friend broke his that way, cussing at it. She
yeah,
overloaded. I mean, just stopped working. Will not work anymore. Just went silent.
Oh my
well,
goodness.
Oh,
for good reason, because half the time it's like, listen. If you can't
It doesn't
understand, it's
listen.
like my kids in the classroom. If you can't understand me the first time I said it, I don't want to repeat myself 15 times. The
oh my goodness. Well,
electronic teenager.
any other
What?
thoughts for the city in the sea, or AKA the Doom City, AKA the City of Sin?
I liked it overall.
I do too.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's better than the words with a mummy. That's all. I'll say that. Yeah, not
It-
one of my favorites.
It's going to be very interesting to see if there's any other of Poe's poems or stories that's going to stump Jeannie the way that one did.
I'm gonna have to say, yeah, there probably will be. We just
We'll
haven't got
see.
to it yet. Maybe something will usurp some words with a mummy.
Yes, absolutely. Well, all right. So we'll have a Descent into the Maelstrom July 30th, last Tuesday of July, and then El Dorado the last Tuesday of August, the 27th. And so I'm looking forward to both of those. Descent in the Maelstrom, I think I've only read once, and so I'm excited to go back to it and really dig into that one. So, and so
I like your idea, Will.
what are you? I was gonna say, he says, "Hell for Jeannie is a performance of some words with a mummy, but with constant interruptions."
Or with constant buffering, that circle
Yes.
going around.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Oh my
That would
goodness,
be it.
that's so funny. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining, and this has been a great discussion. And everybody have a good rest of the month, and we will see you the end of July.
Have a good
Stay
time on your
cool,
trip.
people.
Okay,
Thank
happy
you.
4th of July.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
happy
Yes,
have a good
everybody
holiday.
too. All right, bye,
Everyone.
guys.
Okay.
Bye. See you
Bye-bye.
next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.